I'm Alex Sujong Laughlin, and on every episode of my new podcast, Try Hard, I'm talking to someone about something they've always wanted to do, but haven't. Yet. First, we dig into why they want to do it and what's been getting in the way. And then, we set a challenge for them. You can listen to Try Hard from Defector Media and Radiotopia wherever you find podcasts.
This podcast is supported by The Real Real. Meet Christine. She loves shopping. And this is the sound of fashion overload. Too many fabulous things, not enough space. So Christine started selling with The Real Real.
I've always loved collecting designer pieces. Gucci bags, Prada heels. But my style keeps evolving. Selling with The Real Real? Game changer. I earn more, and they do everything.
Seriously, just drop off your items or schedule a pickup. We handle the photos, descriptions, pricing, even shipping. You just sit back and watch your items sell fast to our 38 million members.
And I get peace of mind knowing I earn more selling with The Real Real than anywhere else.
Exactly. That's the sound of your closet working for you. The Real Real. Earn more, save time, sell fast. And right now, you can get an extra $100 site credit when you sell for the first time. Go to therealreal.com to get your extra $100. Therealreal.com. That's therealreal.com.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
You're listening to a Frequency Podcast Network production.
He's in the building!
Drink the moment. Drink it.
I said empty your mind.
Coquettish and coy. Ow. Ow.
What?
There's people that are dying.
The wickedly talented.
More than great. It was historic.
Crack is
Oh, good for you.
I have to apologize.
One of the hottest 50th men in Baltimore.
Hello, and welcome back to The Reheat, a podcast that re-examines the hottest celebrity news and scandals of yesteryear and asks, how would we react to the same events if they transpired today? I'm your co-host, Sadaf Hassan.
And I'm Sarah Sahagian. Last week, we studied the tale of Bennifer 1.0, a hot love affair from the OOs that was recently reignited. This week, we're going back in time to March 20th, 1974. The night a lone gunman attempted to kidnap the 23-year-old Princess Anne. This week's episode will be a bit more serious in tone than our first two installments. The details of this incident are violent, and since Anne was the daughter of the United Kingdom's head of state, it was more of a hard news story than a celebrity scandal when it happened. However, it's a fascinating historical event, and one that has been somehow forgotten by history. It didn't even make it into Netflix's The Crown, a prestige drama all about Britain's royal family. Before we get into the meat of the story, I'd like to acknowledge the undeniable truth that the British monarchy is an outdated colonial institution. I fully acknowledge it has an egregious legacy and a problematic present. And despite this, there is a part of me that thinks royal babies are adorable. That same part of me screens every doc about the Windsors on Netflix and has paid to tour Buckingham Palace. That is a true fact about me. I'm a conflicted royal watcher, but I am one. I've been interested in this family ever since I read my grandmother's Hello magazines as a child. I cannot deny how fascinating I find these out-of-touch elites. So, Sadaf, are you a royal watcher too?
Absolutely not. Unless we're talking about watching The Crown, which I love and adore, have watched every episode multiple times. And also, I do love Princess Diana, which I feel like I'm kind of obligated to as a brown person. She loved our people. But I don't look down on those who do. And Sarah, I know you're a big royalist, and I fully support that. I do think it's fun. I get it. They're also just a family of colonialists, you know?
Yep, they are. In the 1980s and 90s, Princess Diana received credit for shaking up the monarchy. You mentioned Diana, and people loved her because she was so unique. She felt like she was injecting modernity into the royal family, and it felt like it hadn't ever been done at the time. She wasn't a traditional princess. She spoke out about women's mental health struggles and eating disorders. Hell, she dumped her prince for infidelity. Today, Meghan Markle is a similarly revolutionary figure in the royal family. She's critiquing the monarchy's racism and outdated traditions. And I love both Diana and Meghan. But if you like their brave and rebellious energy, there's someone whose bravery, tenacity, and strength has been a little bit overlooked. Please allow me to introduce you to another British princess for you to fangirl over, Princess Anne. Sadaf, what do you know about Princess Anne? What are your thoughts about her? Do you have any?
I do. All of my knowledge begins and ends with The Crown, which I understand is a fictional retelling. But I know that she is biting. She's hilarious. She had a prune-like frown, which I think runs in the family. She had that terrible accent. But I know that she was a character, and I know that she got a little bit of the quote-unquote bitch narrative that Princess Diana got, that Meghan Markle gets now, that Margaret got for a bit, which seems to be the case for any of the rebellious women in the family. And while I knew about the kidnapping, I actually don't know any details.
I am a stan for Princess Anne. Anybody who knows me knows that. She came into the world on August 15th, 1950. We'll start at the very beginning of her life. She was the second child to then Princess Elizabeth, who was heir to the British throne, and her husband Philip, the now deceased Duke of Edinburgh. Anne was born at Clarence House in London. She weighed exactly 6 pounds, which is a detail I'm sharing because for some reason we always say how much babies weigh when they're born. I'm not really sure why everyone needs to know that, but that's a social custom.
I love knowing that detail, Sarah. I can use that.
Princess Anne grew up to be an accomplished horsewoman. She loved horses from the time she was a child. She actually won the individual gold medal at the 1971 European Eventing Championships. In 1976, Anne became the first Royal Olympian when she was named to the British equestrian team. That means she competed at the Olympics in Montreal. So there's a little Canadian connection to my favorite princess, and that makes me quite happy. In 1973, Anne wed her husband, her first husband, Lieutenant Mark Phillips of the Queen's Dragoon Guards. Anne was the it royal of her day. Not only was she a champion equestrian, but Mark, the guy she chose to marry, was a commoner, which was still unusual for princesses of the British Empire at that time. The couple got to know each other on the equestrian circuit. Even before marrying Anne, Mark was a celebrity in his own right. He actually won an Olympic gold medal for equestrian at the 1972 Olympic Games in Munich. Anyway, they were a very glamorous, very athletic pair. The public loved them, which is evidenced by the fact that their November 1973 wedding was televised and watched by millions. So I have a clip from the Associated Press's coverage of Anne's fabulous wedding day that I want to play for you.
The wedding of the decade, Princess Anne and Captain Mark Phillips. In the Scottish coach, the Queen Mother, the Prince of Wales, and Prince Andrew.
Sadaf, did you have any idea Anne was such a 1970s it girl?
No, I had no clue. And I really love it because, again, she kind of just parts from the whole prim and proper royal woman, which I really adore. And the fact that she was an Olympian and a horse girl is kind of great. She reminds me of Margaret in that way again, Elizabeth's sister. You know, she was headstrong. She had an attitude. And again, that was unique for a woman of that era, except, of course, if it's Diana that we're talking about. But that's a whole other story.
She is a very strong, very interesting individual. And I mean, I would love to hang out with her. So let's now get into the details of the kidnapping. Fair warning, I'm not going to get into every tiny detail. It's possible that there are some parts of this story that you find particularly interesting that I'm going to leave out. However, I'm going to do a broad stroke summary of the events that took place on this evening.
And that is because we know you royalists are savages. Just saying.
Basically. So on the night of the attempted kidnapping, young Anne and her new spouse headed towards Buckingham Palace after attending a charity film screening. They were traveling in style in a Rolls-Royce limousine with a royal insignia. Anne and her husband were accompanied by their chauffeur, a lady-in-waiting, and Inspector James Wallace Beaton, a member of Scotland Yard's Special Operations Branch charged with royal protection. So, this is quite the entourage that they have. The kidnapping attempt took place on the Mall, I never pronounced that correctly, a road that runs between London's Trafalgar Square and Buckingham Palace. A white Ford Escort overtook the rolls and forced the driver to stop. A bearded man with light red hair exited the Ford. The man turned out to be 26-year-old Ian Ball, who suffered from considerable mental health issues. At the time, Inspector Beaton initially assumed Ball was just experiencing a bit of road rage. So the inspector wasn't that concerned. He stepped out of the car to talk to Ball and reason with him, and then Ball shot him in the right shoulder. Beaton was carrying an automatic weapon, which actually isn't true of all British police officers, but he was charged with royal protection, so he was armed. And he tried to fire at Ball, but it didn't really work because his aim was off due to the injury. Next, Ball decided to start threatening Anne and Mark in the limousine. He started screaming at them, "Open or I'll shoot." Beaton, who was quite brave here, jumped back inside the limousine to place himself between the couple and their attacker to protect them. But Ball shot into the car anyway. Beaton's hand deflected the bullet. So that means that by this point, Beaton has been shot twice. He's pretty badly injured. Ball then shot Beaton a third time, and by this point, Beaton was so badly injured, he ended up falling out of the car and onto the street, bleeding. Next, chauffeur Alexander Callender stepped out to confront the gunman, but Ball shot him too. By that point, the lady in waiting had escaped by crawling out of the car with Anne's blessing. So Anne was like, "Yeah, get out of here. I want you to be okay." And Anne and her husband were pretty much unprotected. Ball pulled the back door open and grabbed Anne's arm. Her husband was trying to protect her. He was holding on to her waist, and Anne was holding on to him to try to prevent Ball from pulling her out of the limousine. I don't know. Sadaf, do you think that his efforts were sufficiently valiant to save his wife here?
Not at all. If he was holding on to her waist, was he protecting himself? Was he protecting her? I don't buy any of it. Meanwhile, the lady in waiting has scurried off in the disguise of saving Anne and herself. And the whole thing does not sound scary to me. It just sounds hysterical, to be honest with you. It sounds like it was choreographed. It sounds like a mob of dancers just showing up out of nowhere, pulling off this great routine, and somehow everybody gets hurt except Anne. How does that even happen? And I'm sorry, I mean, no disrespect to gingers, but it doesn't help that Ian was a man with light red hair. I'm suspect.
Around this time, Ball gives Anne his scary but very politely worded pitch. It's a very British kidnapping attempt. He reportedly said, "Please come out, you've got to come." Years later, in the 1980s, Anne will recount the events of this night in a TV interview with Michael Parkinson. As she recounts it, Anne's response to Ball's announcement that she had to leave was simply to ask why. She also said, "Not bloody likely." So, Sadaf, is this story more violent than you were expecting? By this point, pretty much everyone has been shot except for Anne and her husband and the lady in waiting who hightailed it out of there.
I would say it's less violent than I was expecting because I knew this happened, but I never knew all the details about it. And while I did have a few little dramatic gasps and pearl clutching moments, I was mostly just kind of in shock that this almost sounds so low key that it sounds like a publicity stunt. You know, it's like a bullet might have grazed someone might have stumbled, someone might have gotten shoved. It's all so bizarrely comedic, I have to say.
Yeah, well, don't worry. It gets more violent. I mean, if what you were looking for was a Tarantino movie, there's more blood to come.
I want blood spatter, Sarah. That's what I want. No, I don't. Sorry, royalists. Don't come at me.
So one nice thing about this case is there's a lot of bystander intervention from people who noticed what was happening and tried to help. It's the kind of event that makes you think that maybe people are basically good. My favorite fact is that a tabloid reporter is a hero here. Daily Mail journalist John Brian McConnell witnessed the scene and decided to stop and help. He recognized the royal insignia on the limo, so he knew a member of the royal family was in trouble. Now, that suggests to me that perhaps he wouldn't have intervened had it just been not royal people, but still, he was brave here. When McConnell approaches Ball, he gets right to the point. He reportedly said, "Don't be silly, old boy." He advised Ball to, quote, "put the gun down," and then Ball shot him too. There's a pattern here.
One thing I think a lot of people don't realize is that journalists are very antisocial, prickly people, apart from us, obviously. So this is shocking behavior from a reporter. But I see no redemption for this man because I do not think there is a worse breed out there than Daily Mail reporters who exclusively focus on the royals just to tear them apart. And he's one of those vultures. And I'm sure that he saw this as a story that was enveloping him. Getting involved makes it an even better story. Or maybe he just wanted to be the center of it, which I think some journalists do. And he got that moment. He got his 15 minutes.
Well, he definitely did get his 15 minutes of fame. But the story continues. After McConnell falls to the ground, Ball turns around and tries to force Anne out of the vehicle. And now it's another bystander, a boxer named Ronald Russell, who gets their time to shine. Russell approached from behind and punched Ball in the back of the head. Now Anne had an opportunity for escape. She reached for the door handle at the opposite side of the back seat. She opened it and pushed her body backwards out of the car. Anne was thinking strategically here. She said about this move, quote, "I thought that if I was out of the car that he might move," end quote. As Ball ran around the car towards the princess, she jumped back in with Phillips, that was her husband, shutting the door. Ronald Russell then punched Ball in the face. So his boxing abilities are really paying off here.
Yeah, I think this guy comes out of nowhere and he's our absolute hero. And I just see him as a potential love interest for Anne now. That's what I want to see happen. I want to see the two of them run away and flee the scene and just be together forever because her husband does not know how to protect her. Not that she needs a man to protect her, but God, it would have been a nice thread to the story. I'm just saying.
So Sadaf is going to go home and write the Crown fan fiction. I would totally read this. I honestly would love her to end up with Ronald Russell, but spoiler alert, she doesn't. By now, the police had heard about the incident and were approaching. Astutely, Anne noticed Ball getting more and more nervous. She told Ball, quote, "Go on, and now's your chance." Ball decided to flee, but was chased by Detective Constable Peter Edmonds, who responded to the call for help. According to the BBC, he is the police officer who caught Ball by chasing him and straight up tackling him. So this gets pretty dramatic. So, Sadaf, do you have any idea why Ball wanted to kidnap Princess Anne?
I really don't, but I do wonder if it's one of those instances where a quote-unquote commoner kind of just wanted a piece of the royal family, because they were so held on a pedestal, especially at that time. And I think people who were of a lesser standing resented them a little bit. And maybe it was one of those things, as we know from the man who did break into Queen Elizabeth's home, which was also an episode of The Crown. But I also think it could have just been an instance where he wanted money and this seemed like an easy, quick ploy. And you know what? It is shocking how close he got because you kind of assume that the royals have more security than anybody in the world.
Well, it turns out Ball intended to take Anne hostage, or as he pitched it, come with me for a day or two. So he wasn't using the word hostage here. He wanted £2 million in ransom. Some places reported $3 million. Reports vary. But the reason he wanted the ransom money is not what I was expecting. A May 1974 article on Ball's trial that appeared in The Guardian suggested that Mr. Ball planned to give the ransom money to Britain's National Health Service to be used to improve the care and treatment of psychiatric patients. And at his trial, he did say, quote, "I would like to say that I did it because I wish to draw attention to the lack of facilities for treating mental illness under the National Health Service. As someone who lived in Britain briefly, I can attest that he is accurate here. The mental health treatments available for people in the UK are not adequate." His plan to kidnap Anne was not a heat-of-the-moment thing. Ball spent 2 years planning to abduct her. He took on a new name, John Williams, and burned his passport and other identification, which is very talented Mr. Ripley. He also flew all the way to Spain to buy 2 pistols, and the creepiest part is that he rented a house near Anne's home in Sandhurst. That's also a little odd because then he decided to abduct her in London, not in Sandhurst.
Yeah, I'm only getting more questions at this point, and now I am really clutching my pearls. This man put the work in. Damn.
No, he's a very, very diligent would-be kidnapper. At Ball's trial, there was expert medical testimony provided arguing he had profound mental health issues and that he should be imprisoned in a hospital instead of a traditional prison. He was sent to Broadmoor, a high-security psychiatric hospital in Berkshire, where, according to the most recent reports, he remains to this day.
I'm glad he wasn't imprisoned, but I'd also hope that there was real rehabilitation happening at Broadmoor, which is also a little difficult for me to believe because it's a high security psychiatric hospital. This was in a different time. It seemed like they were just kind of trying to push him away and get rid of the problem. And that's also something that we know the royals do. They've banished their own cousins to psychiatric hospitals just to hide that part of their history. So I have a lot of questions. I wonder what his mental health actually was, how he was coping, if they really did take care of him, and if they're really doing it right now, or if he's really just kind of been shut away.
Yeah, I know. It's a very fraught issue, and I'm not entirely sure what the correct course of action was here, but it does feel like imprisoning someone indefinitely who is experiencing really significant psychiatric problems isn't as humane as I would like it to be, even though I do acknowledge at the time Ball posed a danger to society. So now that we've discussed the events of the night, let's take a little bit of a break before we get into the press coverage and the problems that I have with the way Anne was kind of cast as a victim.
This podcast is supported by The Real Real. Meet Christine. She loves shopping. And this is the sound of fashion overload. Too many fabulous things, not enough space. So Christine started selling with The Real Real.
I've always loved collecting designer pieces. Gucci bags, Prada heels. But my style keeps evolving. Selling with The Real Real? Game changer. I earn more, and they do everything.
Seriously, just drop off your items or schedule a pickup. We handle the photos, descriptions, pricing, even shipping. You just sit back and watch your items sell fast to our 38 million members.
And I get peace of mind knowing I earn more selling with The Real Real than anywhere else.
Exactly. That's the sound of your closet working for you. The Real Real. Earn more, save time, sell fast. And right now, you can get an extra $100 site credit when you sell for the first time. Go to therealreal.com to get your extra $100. Therealreal.com. That's therealreal.com.
Now that we've discussed the details of thwarted kidnapping, let's talk about how the media has addressed this event over the years. In March of 74, the palace quickly released a statement that described Anne and Mark as unhurt, but obviously very shaken. That happened right after the kidnapping. This narrative of Anne as someone who was saved by a group of men who risked their lives for a princess in distress is what subsequently got picked up by the mainstream media. That was the story that they thought would sell, I suppose. It was also the story they thought was the extent of the truth. That palace statement was quoted in newspapers around the world, from the Daily Oklahoman and the Minneapolis Star Tribune to the New York Times and Canada's own Vancouver Sun. The March 21st, 1974 issue of the Vancouver Sun also shared the account of a witness who described, quote, how the royal couple shuttled helplessly across the back seat. And use of the word helplessly suggests that they were frightened, which of course they were, but also suggests that Anne is kind of a passive victim here. The kidnapping story took up the entire front page of Britain's The Evening Standard, and the biggest headline read, quote, "We're proud of James," the police tell his wife. The headline is kind of propaganda of sorts. James Beaton certainly was brave. I do not mean to dismiss how he risked his life and came so close to death to save others. But at the same time, that was true of a lot of people that night. A lot of people who didn't receive the training he did, who didn't have the weapon he did, and who weren't paid to do it. The Guardian, which is one of Britain's papers of record, described the royal couple as, quote, huddled together in the car during the kidnapping attempt. The Guardian's coverage also referred to witnesses who reported Mark and Anne, quote, remained calm. And that's pretty much the most heroic description of them available at the time. In addition to describing Anne as, quote, very shaken, the New York Times coverage discussed how Anne immediately called her father in Indonesia and her brother, Prince Charles, who was on the West Coast in the United States. So she's cast as this woman who is very shaken, understandably, of course she would be, and who's seeking kind of comfort from men, and seeking emotional support from the men in her life, her husband, her father, her brother. She's definitely being portrayed as a damsel in distress, as kind of a weak, fragile princess. When you look at all these details collectively, right? The fact that she's constantly being cast as somebody who needs help, both physical help and emotional help. And there aren't really mentions of the things that she did to help save herself, which we will get to later. So, Sadaf, how do you feel about this portrayal of Anne as a victim?
I despise any time back then, now, in the future, when a man gets to have all the glory and there's a woman involved who's headstrong. She can take care of herself. Again, she is one of the few people who did not get shot or even remotely injured in this entire ordeal. And I think there's something to be said about that. She's also was super calm during the entire thing. She was so chill. And through the whole thing, I think as a journalist, if I were around then, the one thing that I would have wanted to know is what was going through her head. What did she feel like when this was happening? That's all I want to know. And I would want to put her face on every cover of every newspaper, not whatever cop, because I don't really care about that. Maybe I'd put in Ronald Russell because I'd love to see that guy. But other than that, I think it would be all Princess Anne for me. She's no damsel in distress.
She's being saved by these noble men. She's kind of like Sleeping Beauty, this victim that we assume can't do anything to help herself. But that's not actually true. Anne received an opportunity to share her perspective of what the kidnapping was actually like for her in the 1980s. So up until this point, it's mostly been the palace speaking for her. It's been the palace casting her as this damsel in distress. It's been them pushing that narrative that got picked up by the international media. But she does an interview with BBC talk show host Michael Parkinson, and she gets to talk about the details as she remembers them.
What did you say? What do you remember the discussion? I mean, what did he say?
Well, he said I had to go with him. Can't remember why.
I don't think you really gave a reason why.
No, perhaps not.
But you were quite obstinate about it.
I said I didn't think I wanted to go. Thank you very much. I was scrupulously polite because I thought it was silly to be too rude at that stage of the game. And we had a fairly low-key discussion about the fact that I wasn't going to go anywhere. And wouldn't it be much better if you just went away and we'd all forget about it?
Did you expect Anne to be this charming?
No, I mean, again, if I base it off The Crown, which is where I get all my royal knowledge, unfortunately, I could guess that. But I think my favorite thing about it, and he says it too, is that she's so obstinate. I mean, this is a very stubborn person, and I love that about her because it just doesn't seem like anybody in the royal family is that way. They kind of just, especially the women, you assume that they're very submissive people, but she's not like that, and she's impossible to pin down. She seems just a little cold, which is how I love my women. And even her hair, which I think we could call like a bouffant, I mean, that looks bulletproof itself, and that's how she kind of generally comes off. And she also kind of speaks about this really horrific time in her life as a non-event, which I find really, really fascinating. It's almost like it never really happened. And again, that just adds to my publicity stunt theories. I don't know if that's true or not. But no, I actually just love it. And I'm sad that we had to see this interview all those years later because I think that's exactly what I would have liked to see the day or the time after that event happened in the papers.
I love your conspiracy theory that this was all a publicity stunt. I love that. Who knows? Internet, go look into this. So I think that she's very droll. I appreciate her dry wit. She's an excellent storyteller. I really love the part in the interview where she refers to, quote, the tedious discussion about not going anywhere. I just think it's kind of funny the way she sees all of this as like, someone tried to kidnap me and it was kind of boring, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what else you got? I'm a bloody Olympian, okay? Like, I can take anything.
She's a horse girl. She's got this.
Exactly. So later on in the interview with Parkinson, Anne also explained that during the altercation, quote, the back of my dress split. And she says this was his most dangerous moment, referring to Ball. She claims, quote, I lost my rag at that stage, end quote. Everyone in the audience laughs uproariously. Like, this woman is really good at spinning a yarn.
That's the thing. She's so funny. I mean, she could have told this anywhere on a stage and it would kill. It's so great.
I know. It's like a story from The Moth, right? Like, you think it's from a podcast and she's a comedian who's trying to make this as delightful and entertaining as possible. And to an extent, she is trying to make it delightful and entertaining. Like, the royal family does need to fascinate us, or we won't continue to pay for their existence. But she's really very good at being a compelling speaker. And that's one thing that The Crown gets right about her. They portray her as, just a good laugh. And I think that is accurate.
But one thing I do want to add, and I feel like we have to touch on this because she is so funny, and just assuming that it's not a publicity stunt, I do wonder if this is the way that she processed her trauma over what happened, because that moment had to have been traumatic. And this is something that a lot of women do. They process it through laughing about it and through humor. And years have passed by at this point. This is how she's telling it to the media and to the world. And as we know, the royals hide a lot of shit. So for her to put it out there like this, she kind of has to tell it this way, because they don't like details of things like this coming out into the world and people getting their own ideas and spinning it a certain way. When she tells it like this, it's digestible. People love it. They want to hear more, which is not what you'd think about a suspected kidnapping. So I don't know. I think there's something to that.
Well, the firm, as the royal family refers to itself,
chilling,
expects its members to be stoic. Before Diana, people didn't really, in the royal family, speak publicly about their feelings. And even now, it's still quite unusual for them to do that, to talk about their trauma. I mean, that's one of the reasons why the Meghan Markle interview, I had huge ratings, because she was speaking about important issues, and it was also quite unprecedented. That hadn't happened with where you had a royal speaking with such candor in decades. So I think you're right that there probably would have been pressure to laugh off her trauma. The royals are expected to, quote, keep calm and carry on. That's the British way. But in particular, it's seen as the royal way. They're meant to be symbols of a nation that is supposed to be a strong, calm nation. So you're absolutely correct. Like, there's no other way she could have told this story.
Right. I mean, imagine if the Meghan interview, if she had played off what happened to her and Harry, and how she even had a suicide attempt and all the pressure she felt being in that royal family. Imagine if she told that story by laughing about it as if it was this funny thing that happened with less details. We would have brushed it off. It would not be the story that it's become today. We wouldn't take that seriously. We wouldn't take mental health seriously. It's two very different avenues you can choose. And it's nice to see that things have changed all these years later, as hilarious as Anne telling that story was.
And I also, I don't want to deprive Anne of her agency. I think it's very possible that she does view it as kind of an absurdly funny event, but could still also have some PTSD from it. We can tame multitudes. We can often laugh about our trauma while still in private experiencing it, or even going to therapy about it. I have no idea if she went to therapy. I have no idea if she had PTSD flashbacks. But it is possible for both things to be true. However, you're absolutely right. If Meghan had told her story that way, it would have been received so differently, and it wouldn't have started an important conversation about perinatal mental health and about racism in the royal family.
I totally agree with you. I also wonder if the royals even believe in therapy, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, they have, we can talk about that on another episode. They have a very complicated relationship with therapy, and they, there are members who have gone, but they haven't necessarily always been able to access effective therapy. So Anne also shares another detail in this interview that's really cool. She admits to Parkinson that she's foggy on the order in which things happened, but that's understandable. When you go through an incredibly stressful event, you often don't remember it completely accurately, or you might be foggy on the details. But one thing she does remember is that she could reach the door with her hand at one point when she was kind of lying on the floor of the car. And what she decided to do when she realized she could reach the door was a backward somersault onto the road. She's an Avenger. She is basically Black Widow. This was a team effort. The guys who saved her are heroic. She's also heroic. This woman is a freaking Olympian who used her athletic prowess to help save herself.
Can I also just say, Sarah, how is any of this possible? I'd love a reenactment of this entire ordeal. It's ludicrous if you think about it. I'm not saying it didn't happen. Maybe I am a little bit, but I don't know. I'm confused.
I understand why you're incredulous. It does sound pretty fantastical. At the same time, she was an extraordinarily athletic person.
She was an Olympian. She was.
So when the latest season of Netflix's hit royal drama, The Crown, was released in late 2020, a variety of outlets, from Digital Spy and the Evening Standard in the UK to America's People magazine, wrote pieces questioning why Princess Anne's thwarted abduction, arguably the most dramatic and cinematic event to happen to the royal family in recent history, was left out. I agree, this was a missed opportunity. Very few of us remember that this happened. I refuse to believe the writers on The Crown, whose job it is to research the royal family and write about them, forgot that this happened.
Yeah, it's completely bonkers. That's not a word that I ever use. But in this case, it absolutely is. I mean, it's also just bizarre because here's a super juicy narrative they could have used for an entire episode. And it just adds to my curiosity when it comes to the way this whole event was kind of buried over the years, and even the way that Anne sort of downplayed it. It almost seems like they don't want to give it any attention. And I think the other thing is, and this is just my own theory, she's such a compelling character. A lot of the people in the royal family are far, far from compelling and just incredibly dull. And I wonder if the fear would be that she would sort of take the spotlight from somebody else if they were to include her in a narrative like that. I don't know, because at the same time, the recent seasons focused on Diana. Nobody can pull the spotlight from Diana. But if anybody could, maybe it would be Anne, sort of in the same way that Margaret definitely did that from Liz.
Mm-hmm. I would have made it the premiere episode of the new season. That's how I would have done it. But you know what? They didn't hire me as a consultant. I think the season is the poorer for it, but that was up to them. That was their decision. So what are your thoughts on why Anne eventually, years later, felt empowered to readdress the narrative and recast herself? She's no longer the victim. She's no longer the helpless princess. She makes it clear that she is a strong woman who helped save herself. Why do you think she felt empowered to do that all those years later?
I mean, I do wonder if it's the changing in eras, This was more, when she spoke up, it was more of a time when women had more agency, and people loved that. People liked the idea of a quote unquote badass woman. And that was the time that she could say it. And I think that she could get a good reception. Maybe she knew she couldn't back then. Maybe it was also that the royal family had less of their grasp on her and she felt more comfortable to share what she wanted to share.
I think it is the changing era. I think in part it's also she's getting older and more confident. She was so young when this happened. I mean, she was barely more than a child. She was 23. So I do understand that at this age, maybe you don't push back against your parents as much, but now she's accomplished stuff. I mean, she's been to the Olympics. She's a mom. She's doing her adult patronages. I guess maybe she just felt like, I'm not going to be anyone's shrinking violet. I'm going to be me. Sadaf, how do you think the story would be covered differently if it had occurred in 2021? If the same thing happened to Kate Middleton, and let's hope it never does, do you think the palace would be feminist enough to mention any heroic contributions she may have made to the rescue effort? Or would they still be more comfortable focusing on the men who bravely tried to spare her?
Nothing would change. The royals don't change. These people are artifacts. These are sentient artifacts. They don't care. And they love to play into ancient roles. They love to keep women in the damsel in distress role. And I think if this happened to Kate, who is so, so, so beloved, even more than Anne probably, Sarah, you would know best. But I think it would become the super huge, massive global story. And I do see it being a bigger case than it was then, and then it still is. And it would be something nobody would ever forget. They would know all the details about it. And I think if she did happen to save herself in a sense, or kind of performed through it exactly the same way that Anne did, I think that would also be a bigger story. And I would hope that she would get to have her voice in it and be able to tell her perspective sooner than decades later.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Well, it is now time for Hindsight is 2021, the segment where we discuss one thing that we would do differently if we were in the position of our subject.
I shouldn't have done that.
So, what would you do differently, Sadaf, if you were Princess Anne, or Mark, if you want to be Mark in this situation?
Many, 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 many things. First of all, I would break into song because that's exactly what this whole situation called for. And if I were the husband, I would locate my balls and I would do something about it and protect my wife. think if I was her, I would maybe do exactly the same thing. Maybe I would be even more stubborn. Because she's the one who did all of this exactly the way that I think she should have. And I would have also spoken up sooner. But again, that's easy for me to say in 2021. I don't know what the situation would have been back then, but I don't know. I also, again, I would love to be the lady in waiting in this situation because I think she's the one who did it all perfectly from beginning to end. What about you, Sarah?
So if I were Princess Anne, I would want everyone to know what a badass I was to begin with. I would shout it from the rooftops. If my family didn't want the spokesperson to say that I had helped rescue myself, I would just disown them. But I understand most people would not disown their entire family over a disagreement like that. I get why she took time to share her truth, but I would have been so proud of myself. And that's probably because I'm not an Olympian, right? And I'm not calm under pressure. So I would have been so delighted with my performance here that I would have done interviews to every outlet. I would have shared my truth.
I mean, we would have gotten book deals. Where was Anne's book deal? And also, to be honest, now that you mention it, I would have absolutely been shot. There's no question about that. And I would have pursued an affair with Ronald Russell, as I've already alluded to.
I just love the story. If we have to tell children fairy tales, this is the type of fairy tale I want my daughter to hear, about a princess helping to save herself, a princess basically being one of the British version of the Avengers. I think it's a fun story. I think it's empowering. I can't get enough of Princess Anne. Again, I know the monarchy is a terrible institution. I'm not making excuses. But as an individual human, I think Princess Anne is kind of cool.
I think the royals are colonizers, and I think this was all a publicity stunt.
That's also possible.
Well, as always, we hope you'll be back next week as we jump from the royals to the world of sports and the super muddled legacy of one Bruce Lee. Now, if you want to hear more from me, you can find me on Twitter at _Sadaf Hassan. Sarah, where can our listeners find you?
Listeners can find me on Twitter at Sarah Sahagian. And if you liked this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe so other listeners can find us too. Thanks for listening.